This week on Carlie's Couch, we're talking about discretion and when to know not to share.
I don't know why Delta business is the first thing that came to mind whenever you said that.
Huh? That's funny.
Got triggered a little bit.
Child, I don't remember none of that. I just got my manuals and stuff back.
It's a line of business. It's to mind your business. Mm-hmm. You do not have any business. Anyways. We have business. We have Carlie's Couch business today.
Right. Strictly Carlie's Couch. Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for listening. We are on episode 351. So it's been a lot of episodes. So feel free, if you're ever wondering if we've covered a topic or if there's something that you're interested in, just put in the search bar Carlie's Couch and that topic, and it may come up because we do put the tags in for, most of the relevant searches and all of that. So.
And if it doesn't, the best thing is you can message us or comment on something, and we're typically pretty good about doing episodes whenever people ask us to. So, shout out to us.
Yeah, look, we need some IDs, child.
we 351 deep. 351 deep, baby.
Yeah. But today we are talking about discretion, and it's just been something that I feel has been coming up a lot for me, in that I notice it in some people around me, to the point where I feel that if you notice something somebody does, then that means that you have space to do more of that, if that makes sense. So, like, if I'm like, oh, man, she really, she was really quiet. Like, she doesn't say names of stuff, even to me, or doesn't let me know things until it's done. And the fact that I thought about that, it's like, I probably could do a little bit better with that. So, like, that type of thing. Also in podcasts and videos and stuff that I've been watching lately, it talks more about like watching your words and your speech, and it's just like no reason for other people's name to be popping up, or other things to be going on. And with this, I'm not even necessarily saying like we're talking about extreme like gossiping, or not being discreet about like in an extreme way, but even just like on your day to day, when it comes to work and what you're doing with your own work and business, what's going on in the lives of other people, like your friends and stuff like that. There's just so many areas in which, like, would that benefit us to be more discreet?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that, we already know so much about so many people that we don't need to know. There's like, we know so much about everybody all the time. And so it's not like mysterious artist thing, but it does remind me of like artists who are very mysterious and they only share certain things, and there's an allure to that. But I also think someone was talking about Beyonce, and she became like inaccessible. Like, she used to do all these interviews and they laughed. I was like, well, that's why she don't do interviews with us no more. But then now she doesn't, and so there's more interest in her. I would argue to say there would be, regardless, because she's who she is. But even if she wasn't, like, she doesn't be telling us all her business outside of music.
Yeah, and still has the support and all the things. But also, it took a while to get to that,
yes,
right?
So, for sure.
Because even with new artists that I'm working with, they want to be Beyonce, and it's like, bro, you can't be Beyonce with 3 followers. So, you still got to put yourself out there. Now, that doesn't mean you have to show everybody everything you do all day, but there is a place for, in this time and age with social media, how you can build a community and, letting people in a little bit. But that's something that we'll get to as well, because I think that's a big difference nowadays too, is with this impact of social media.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty interested in that. So I'm like, look, let me listen to all these tips.
Is there a time that you can think of, like an example of a time where you're like, should have been a little more discreet, or where you practice discretion, like you want to say something, you're like, nah, I'm not gonna say it?
Yeah, I would say all the time. I used to be an oversharer like a long time ago, just because like that's how I grew up and my mom kind of was, and so it was just how I was. But then I was like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like sharing. But I've been very intentional, especially with sharing stuff online and like things I'm working on, or even like sharing stuff on the podcast about my history and how I grew up and stuff like that. It's very intentional. Like anything I've ever shared has never been an accident. I've already healed and been through it and thought about it and shared, and or used a very vague description to talk through something I was working through.
Okay. I can think of literally like 5 examples of not being discreet, like within the last recently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. Like when you think about what it really is, it's like, it's a lot. So I'll say one big one, because I was like, dang, one big one was when I was going to Will Smith's house to do those anxiety videos with Tatiana and then for TikTok and stuff. And, you know, before I went, because this is something I started trying to practice too, is that before I'm about to do something, like kind of recenter to be like, all right, it's not about me. Let me not try to have ego and stuff. But of course, you know, I was excited. And of course, I can't wait to tell everybody out, you know, oh my gosh, I was at Will Smith's house.
Will Smith.
And so they did the videos and stuff. But then I posted something about like, oh, at Will Smith's house. And I did not think that people, like, it would really blow up like that. And that's the thing, too, going back to social media, is, like, you really never know when or what things. But, you know, I thought my followers, like, you know, my people, and they're not even all my people, but, you know, a few thousand people might see it and be like, okay, cool. And then they were going to drop, and I did it because I knew they were dropping the thing the next morning. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. It's just, like, a little prequel. And then they were like, oh, we're pushing it when we're dropping it. And so, and then as my video started getting like more and more like shares and stuff, I was like, maybe I should have posted it. Cause it's like people didn't know that they were together and they was seeing it. And then one of his guys texted me and was like, he's like, hey, there's nothing wrong with your video, but you know, it's obviously getting a little traction. You mind taking that down? And I just felt so bad. Cause I was like, yeah, I didn't, you know, I could have waited, you know, so stuff popped off, like just being a little too eager, right? And I felt so bad about that for days. I was like, oh, he thinks I'm an ass. Like, I felt so bad. Cause I'm like, I should have knew better. But also, I did not expect random people like searching Will. I didn't, you know, the power of Will Smith, I guess, whatever. But I felt so bad. Cause I was like, ugh. He was like, nothing wrong with the video though, but he was like, obviously it's getting a lot of traction. And I was like, damn. He's like, it's kind of leading to the fact that they were together. Because even as they got more and more numbers, people were like, oh, tell them to do the anxiety thing. And it's like, yeah, that's what they're getting together to do. And people were talking about it.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think, you know, the 300 million people that end up like watching those videos and stuff, you know, it's not like I did anything to it for real. But you can see how like, oh, my feelings kind of hurt. Like, I could have waited. That's one. Another one, damn, I kind of forgot it now. Another one, and this one, maybe I can make this one more general, but I notice a lot because I have a big friend group here. Maybe it's like 13 to 15 people, kind of mixy. And I just started noticing too, like with certain people or within certain groups of us, and it's not, it's just so easy to be like, yeah, Carlie said da-da-da-da, and she was going to the whatever, because we all like know each other, so we'll talk about each other in a way where it's like, you know, what's going on with their family, and yeah, I need to be more organized. I can't believe he didn't da-da-da-da-da. You know what I mean? So it's like it doesn't feel like super evil speech. And I just started noticing, I'm like, every time I say somebody's name, which I like that it's starting to get a little more aware, because now after I have a convo with somebody, I'll be like, I ain't really need to talk about that. Like, you know, I ain't need to make fun of Damo for whatever. But like, while you're saying it, it's like, I'm talking about somebody. I don't need to be doing that. But I also noticed that it was with certain people, we'll talk about people like in a different way, which also makes you evaluate like the people you're hanging out with. And so I'm trying to be more aware of not talking about other friends with friends. And I've had one of my friends before come to me and be like, hey, I heard you said XYZ to this other person. And I was like, you can't keep nothing to yourself. And the crazy part is, but people be like, yeah, stop saying stuff to them, because they just always going to tell everybody, because they didn't even hear from them, they heard it from somebody else. So, but I did appreciate that confrontation, because then I was like, you know what, you're right. Like, I shouldn't be saying anything that you might not want somebody to be like, yeah, you know, Lex said she was uncomfortable, blah, 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 you know, or something you're not just saying to somebody. So I did appreciate that. That was another kind of like wake you up moment. I think there's something, another one, like another example. I might think of it as we go through, because I'm like making the whole podcast confessions right now. But all that to say, there's lots of ways where it's like, I could be more discreet, or like there's a certain place and time that you could talk about certain things, or what you're doing, or mentioning people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so, okay, when we're thinking about discretion as a whole, like, let's define what that is. So what is discretion?
The ability to judge what's appropriate to say or do, or reveal in any given situation. So it's understanding, is this the right time or place? Because there are conversations where you can say, hey, let me get your advice about something, and you might talk about a relationship with somebody or something like that. But are you talking about it and you feel good because you're feeling better than them? Or, you know, like I was saying, one of my clients, I noticed that, like, I'd be like, why you didn't tell me this or that? And it's like, not until stuff is finished that I notice they would say it. And so it's like the time or place, because, well, let me figure it out or see what's happening, or if it's going to go through, you know, 'cause stuff changes so much. Or just not even, like, if it's not real yet, what do we need to talk about it for? So knowing the right timing and situations to talk it through.
Yeah, it shows to have discretion is to have a good level of emotional intelligence, because you understand boundaries, you understand relationships, you understand timing, you can catch the vibes. Like I think about whenever I used to work in construction, and some people come in, oh, how was your weekend? Yeah, you know, me and the homies went to the strip club and did it. And like, you know, and some people that was cool and some people it wasn't. But also it's like, if you trying to get a promotion, you really want to be talking about that every day that you're here. And like just being aware. Because
also, like in the office, that's a good example, because it might be like, yeah, they might be like, yeah, the fellas. But then later they'll use that same information and be like, nah,
he be getting lit on weekend.
He be doing too much. You heard he was at this. Yeah. And then they still gonna be talking about you. But even more than that, I think one of the biggest things that discretion reveals is our need for validation. And so that's to think about how often or in different ways, like when stuff is really actually not about being discreet or being so excited to talk about it, or, you know, whatever, or feeling good because I'm talking about this person, is really in that moment like a bonding thing between me and the person, or, you know, a validation that you're looking for at that time. So I think that's one of the main reasons, if you lack discretion, it could be because of that.
Yeah, you're really trying to connect with somebody. You might not be like, oh, I'm trying to get validated, but you might be trying to deepen a connection. But think about why that's the thing that you're using for that connection. Someone else, like I talked about me, is like not knowing boundaries. Like if you grew up around people who overshare and like are always out here telling all the business and connecting on everything, man, I just had, you know, I always have a day, and then going into whatever's business. Like you might not know proper boundaries, and you'll learn that in trial and error through life. Like I think that that's important. And then understanding like the value of intentionality and the value of privacy, like keeping things to yourself.
And then keep in mind too that discretion isn't necessarily about being like secretive or necessarily like closed off, but more so like having intention when you speak. And so I think that it's such an interesting exercise to think about how I can be more discreet, because it's so immediate and it's so like reactive and like automatic when you're doing that, when you're talking a little too much or saying something, you know, you're not in control and like paused and intentional about your speech. And so, you know, it's like kind of a double fold of like, okay, not only should I, you know, maybe not be giving this information, but also I need to practice like making sure that every word that's coming out of my mouth is for a reason, is, you know, it's proactive, it's, you know, building up and all those things. So I think that we're not necessarily talking about like, okay, this means you need to be a monk in, you know, the Tibetan hills or anything like that.
Unless you want to be. But I think the intentionality is the key. And thinking about like in this society that we live in, constant overshare, but often without discernment. Like there is little to no discernment a lot of times when people are on social media doing lives, crying, sharing everybody's business and their mamas, like all kind of stuff. And not knocking people. I just think that people aren't intentional sometimes when they do that. They see it as a thing where I can hop on and get validation from my side of a story, or get people to feel bad or whatever for that need for validation and connection, but not understanding the ramifications of everything else.
And also on the other side of that too, people are praised for appearing to be so transparent, and you're keeping it real and being authentic and showing emotions online. And so it can feel like you're doing something you should be doing. I just think it's worth looking at your own reflection about it to see like if you're being performative about things, or like to what end, you know, are you showing this thing at this time? But discretion is not only kind of you being just about you being intentional and, you know, being a good person, like not talking about people. It really does serve a lot of benefits for you. One of them is protecting your own like peace and privacy. I recognize even when putting that video up a little too early, that it's like, oh man, it made me be in the shoes of like, imagine like Will Smith or somebody even being online, like how much just privacy you don't really have. Like people are like doing science, trying to look at the things in the background, and I even with, you know, the actual real clip of stuff going viral, or when you look at notable people on social, when you look at the comments, it's just like, you know, people just talking, like making up things, assuming things. Oh, they're doing da 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 da, or that's why look at her, she's gaining too much weight. And it's like, these are real people on these in these pictures and videos and stuff. So it's can protect your peace and privacy to watch what you share.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it before on an episode that it's really important not to share things when you haven't like healed through them, because then like it becomes tougher to deal with and process, and there's just an onslaught of comments and other thoughts and things that maybe you haven't even thought through. So it really is like protecting yourself. I think it also helps maintain professionalism, like clear and defined boundaries, and trust in like professional and work settings. Like you can trust your partners to do what they need to do and show up. And if it is like a big project, especially like a lot of people in Hollywood work with a lot of artists and a bunch of stuff, and it's like knowing that they know how to handle everything that's going on behind the scenes.
It also keeps your next moves protected. Often we talk about things a little too much. I've seen things happen because of talking about it, or even if it's not correlated to you speaking on it, like something may go down and this not happen or whatever. And it's just like focusing on the wrong thing. That's a focus on the validation instead of focusing on the execution of it. And so that's just energy that could go towards bringing something to completion or fruition, and then being able to display that to the world.
Yep. Another benefit of having good discretion is that it avoids unnecessary conflict or misunderstandings. And that's with you oversharing your business, somebody else's, sharing something, like helping someone to misunderstand their relationship and their closeness to you. Like there's so many different things that can go wrong whenever we're not intentional about how we speak.
Yeah, that makes me think about all the couples type content. And it's like, or if somebody says something, people don't know context, or, you know, there's so many assumptions, and girls, you should leave him, and he da-da-da, and just all this stuff. And it's like people don't know, and we know people don't know. So it's just, I imagine it's so much better to keep that stuff off. But Carlie, if you are discreet, can you still navigate like being honest and open with people and speaking to people without doing too much?
Yeah.
Like, is it being dishonest to be discreet?
No, and I'm a trainer and teach yoga and teach classes and hold a lot of space for people. That's something that people in any type of service profession do. We hold a lot of space. And it's a fine balance with sharing things about me to connect or to bring in stuff with a situation without dumping on them, without oversharing, without getting them too close to me about what's about, like, or sharing something that's too close to my heart, like with them. And there's a fine balance. And you can always tell, like, even whenever you're building new relationships, you can always tell when you go too far or when you share a little bit too much. You feel kind of icky, like, wish I hadn't said that, or you go home like, damn, why did I say that? And so I think there's just a fine line, and it's sometimes it can be hard to toe that line whenever you're having a great conversation and like really into it or want to connect or in the flow. Like, yeah.
It's probably a good sign though to actually feel icky, because like that's the stage of it I'm in where I'm like, like if I do something, and again, I'm not out here being crazy with it, but like if something comes up, then I'm just like I'm really challenging myself. Like, I don't need to say nothing unnecessary, right? But then you get frustrated because you realize how much you do it. So how can we practice discretion more intentionally? First of all, I would say, like, pay attention to your speech and what you're typing or saying, and just think about, like, does this need to be said, first of all?
Yeah, does it need to be said to this person at this time? And then in that same vein, when you're trying to understand the difference between vulnerability and oversharing, like, think about what you're trying to get from sharing this certain thing. Yeah. Like, I can come in. Goal? Yeah, exactly. Because if you are trying to get that validation, you probably are oversharing. If you're trying to get them to like you and really reel it in, like, you probably are doing some type of performative something for them, versus like trying to share something to help them, trying to share something for whatever. And if you can't come up with an answer, it's a good sign you should probably just not share that in that moment and circle back maybe whenever you have an answer.
Yeah. So with that, definitely try to understand the difference between your vulnerability and oversharing.
Yep. Lexi talked about protecting your plans until they're ready to be revealed. And so making sure you're doing things on your own terms whenever you're ready, and not just like I don't know, like rush jumping the gun and then end up, oh man, I'm going to drop on, next month on the 13th, and 13th come and ain't no album, and everybody's like, what's up? And you're like, oh my God, why'd I do that?
And there's a reason why people say don't talk about like what your goal is or what you're working on before it's done, because then people can hype you up so much you already feel like you did it, and then you can lose your spark also. So like you really should just like go as hard as you can while you have your own enthusiasm and see what happens from it.
I think that's also a good test. Try to stop talking about stuff and notice if you get more done, because a lot of times you just want that dopamine hit, and you might not even catch that that's what you're doing. Yeah, I'm gonna start this company. I'm working on this thing. I'm about to get my LLC. I'm doing this, and at the end of the month, ain't nothing done.
That's kind of what I was about to go into next too, is to say like that's the biggest challenge is, can you talk less? And it's actually difficult. Like when people are speaking or you're talking to them, just talk more slowly, try to talk more calmly, and just try to speak as little as you can actually, and see what happens. Because I think when I'm doing that, what I notice is if I'm not aware or if I'm not like being present with that intention, it's just like I'm just like blah, 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 and it's like, dang, like what did I even just say? Like it really just go like, that's when I know if I'm just talking so much and I'm like, all right, stop and slow down. Once you're trying to slowing down, then you're paying attention to what you're saying. But be able to sit with discomfort. So you don't have to speak to fill silence. Like when you ask people questions, that's why everybody talk about J Hud right now with these interviews. Like, sis, you answer the question. Like sometimes you got to let it sit, let them keep talking, like paying attention. Don't just like fill in all the space with just saying stuff.
And I think, and I'm speaking for myself because I'm an excitable person. I like to talk. I get caught up in conversations, and sometimes like you do the majority of the talking, you don't really get to know people. You don't give them space to learn or to grow. And so that is a skill I have been honing. Like take a pause before you say anything, before you always be the person to raise your hand and answer a question and offer to help. Just sit. Let other people fill in the gap sometimes.
Anything else we can do to practice more intentionally?
Yeah, you can think about the person and like who you're talking to, your audience, your relationship. Like, are we close enough for me to share this thing? Like in my head, when I'm going through certain things or when I'm trying to process, like I know people I can talk to about those specific things who are great for those things. But if you're talking to some random person at a coffee shop, because people come to me all the time trying to tell me about random things in their life and all that. And I'm like, hey, I might not be the best person. Sometimes it clicks, but like also you should probably find someone who knows you or cares for you a little bit better in those spaces. And maybe that's a sign you can build relationships with people. If you're trying to talk to random folks out in the wild about things. Not to say you can't have connections, but if you're always doing that, that's something you should check.
Yeah, you can have discretion and be authentic at the same time. Authenticity is about living in alignment. And with that, being discreet is about sharing at the right time. Like if you think about it in that way, it's not necessarily that you have to hold everything back, but sharing at the right time and what actually matters at that time and is necessary. We just have too much noise pollution, I guess, when we speak, I would say.
For someone who, let's say, is a new artist or like an entrepreneur or whatever, and they're like, okay, well, where do I even start with knowing what to share? Like how would you answer that? Like if they were your client?
You tell your story. I mean, that doesn't mean you're not being discreet. Your story is about like, why do you have this dream or this goal, or why are you doing this, or how do you feel about your talents? There's just so many things that you can talk about and that you can show if you're talking about like online and building a community, because people can connect with you over the same mindset, the same like hunger and drive, like those types of things. That doesn't mean that you need to mention other people, mention other artists, you know what I mean? Like that shoots you in the foot, especially like in certain industries. It's like, I remember I had one friend who does a lot of hosting, a lot of, just in the mix with the industry and stuff. And he was like, one time he had to go back and like through his tweets and delete everything he'd ever said like bad about an artist, particular artist, because he had an opportunity to interview them or something. And it's like, yeah, if you're going to be in these spaces, you can have whatever thoughts you want to have. And I know certain conversations that I talk to with my friends about, especially when they're around complex topics, as opposed to when you're just talking crap about somebody like online, or trying to get a thought across that has a little more context to it or needs a little bit more discussion. So it's just about like, does this thing standing alone make sense, and is it not harming anybody? Did that answer the question?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I'm sourcing for my own self and my own business. Because I think it's important for people to get to know you and who you are. Like, that's another issue in content is inauthenticity. And so, like, finding what works and feels good to you. Like, don't hop on crying on the camera because that's how so-and-so got 1 million followers. Like, figure out what your story is and how you want to tell it.
And or don't hop on the camera crying because we don't necessarily need to see that for you to get a point across about something that's been hurtful to you. And also at that time, you're in it and you're being reactive, and you're not being proactive to actually like sit in that and you go through that, right, and feel that, because everybody else watching that doesn't have nothing to do with your healing necessarily. So, it's just about like the real goal in that case is just for people to see you and think something and engage, and the goal is not to help yourself in any way. So, I mean, if you're acknowledging that that's why you're doing it for validation, then, do your thing. But I think it would serve us better, especially the way things live forever online. Like, it would serve you to be careful about what you're doing.
Yeah, so this week, think about your personal relationship with discretion, you not being as intentional with your words, and thinking about maybe areas you can practice more discretion. Is it at work? Is it in your content? Is it talking about so-and-so to your friends and sharing too much information or too much information about yourself? And hit us at Carlie's Couch. Let us know.
Peace out.